When people send me a model, the first thing I don't do is I don't dive into the inputs and assumptions. I don't dive into the sheets of calculations. The first things I look for are a summary, a big picture summary of the business, charts, graphs, other ways that they're explaining the major things that are happening. So now that we have a forecast, now it comes down to actually communicating this. Now, if you've noticed so far we have a note sheet which has a bunch of random numbers all through. It's kind of messy. We have a forecast here that's just a row of numbers. If you share this with somebody, the first thing they go to mind is, it's a row of numbers, what do I care about? One of the best things you can do is to create a sheet which is specifically created to communicate the key metrics you want to talk about. It's always a sign of a person who truly understands their audience is when you see summary sheets that have crisp explanations of what's going on. This is actually one of the most fun parts about the model. Am I trying to pitch this to a funder or an investor to say, hey, here's what I expect, how big the business I expect to be? Am I using this to create a plan for my head of product around what I expect the business to achieve in time period? Am I using this to create a forecast for other executives or other people out there? Am I using this to present to my CEO or my other decision makers about a range of options of things we should choose to do? We went through a process earlier to identify the metrics that are important for other comparable businesses. So it's important to use that same thought process in creating the right stories and charts and graphs here. Be clear about the decisions they're trying to make using this data, and then use the metrics and data to help them make those decisions. The first thing I would do to create a summary is create a first simple explanation of key overall financial metrics. In our case, we can say revenue and profit shared are important metrics for us. So we will link directly to the numbers in the model. That's the revenue in over 12 months. And profit, we'll label them directly so that there's no confusion over what they mean. So it's important to use notes or sentences or however you want to describe it to make sense. Cash is an important metric in most business cases. So we may start by saying cash started the 12 months with, maybe an average cash burn of 1,000. Maybe you want to create an average profit. And then cash at the end. And so it's an easy way to show. It says, hey, we were able to make $19,000 in revenues. We were able to share $2,500 to our partners. We started the 12 months with $25,000 in cash. And we actually ended with more. So it's an easy way to show the performance of the business over time. Now, another great way to communicate the business is to create charts. Right? When you look at this row of numbers, you can look at all the different numbers and parse out that there is growth happening, but it probably doesn't really jump off the sheet of page for you. You have to look at each individual number to figure out what's the most important metric do I care about, kind of what's going on, what are the curves and trends. So charts become a great way to communicate this. So we're going to create a chart. So the key point of this is there's many ways to create charts, but you have to figure out what's important, the important metrics you want to communicate, as well as the right chart format to communicate that. In this case, the default start off with a column chart, but this doesn't really, if you look at it, doesn't really make any sense. It's a bunch of numbers over, a bunch of column and numbers that are over time. We're going to change it to a line chart so we can see how each of these metrics change over time. Also, it's a little confusing to have each one of these metrics actually on there, so we're going to go in and actually remove some of these things that aren't necessarily important. Some of these numbers don't change. We're going to remove some of these metrics from the charts. This is probably close, but it still kind of obscures what's going on. So we're going to delete a couple more metrics. The more metrics you have on a chart, the more confusing it gets. You can create really complicated charts that combine different axes and different percentages and different overall numbers. The better way to do that is to use less data on a chart and make more charts to communicate additional data points. That's why we removed the conversion percentage, that's why we removed the free traffic. That's why we're going to remove the order numbers as well, and really just have it focus on revenues and costs. And actually, even in this case, we don't need to say profits because that's kind of an intermediate number. We'll do that. There's really only a couple metrics. And this is a really clear way to say, okay, this is where the growth is happening. We have a massive spike right around the holidays, and it goes back down, but then it continues to kind of grow from there. And we can see it at both revenues as well as profits. So you have full documentation that says, hey, here's for the person who just wants a high-level picture of the model, here you go. For someone who's going to dive deeper into the due diligence to understand the model, here you go. You can dive into, you have a base of what to care about, and then here's all the details behind it. And here's even some source materials behind it. The model is not just a static model, but it's something dynamic that you can use to forecast and change everything over time. Building a model is, yes, it can be complex, it can be messy, but it really is built for you to take away whatever you want to take away from it. But any time that you spend learning how to build models can be valuable because you'll understand it way better. If you understand the exact process that goes into it and you built it, you'll have actually utilized the process of building a model and not just the result of it, and it's gonna be far more valuable in the end.